Daniel. I'm Lindsey O'Donnell-Welch with Decipher, and I'm here today with Daniel Blackford, threat researcher with Proofpoint. Daniel, thank you so much for coming on today to our video.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Proofpoint just came out with their Human Factor 2023 report released this month. And this report covers everything from different malware families that are used in attacks like Emotet, which we all know, to different tactics that cyber criminals are using. So, Daniel, what were really the top takeaways for you from this report this year?
Yeah, I something I always tell my other researchers, right, is that what is interesting to the industry as a whole, and maybe some of the viewers here is can be somewhat different than what is interesting to us on the day to day basis, right? And so, like Emotet, as you mentioned, everyone's familiar with it. We're not surprised at all to see that they continue to be kind of in the top volume of overall mal families for the year. But there were a couple other takeaways that I thought were really surprising. Maybe the first being that 94% of cloud tenants were targeted with some form of either kind of like precision attack or some kind of brute force password spraying each month. I think we all kind of anecdotally thought that was probably already the case, but to have some kind of hard quantification of truly how much it was very interesting. I think the kind of escalation of Toad threats into the millions per month. So Toad is the telephone oriented attack delivery, sometimes also referred to as callback attacks. Just seeing those continue to kind of ramp up, pretty interesting. And then I think the proliferation of kind of reverse proxy phishing, MFA bypass phishing, also continues to just be a newer attack type, a little more sophisticated, that we continue to see just increasing volume of.
Yeah, those are all really impactful and kind of big points that are in the cybersecurity landscape. Just taking a step back here, I wanted to look at this report as a whole. And, I love the name Human Factor Report. Why is it important to highlight the human factor? Like, why is this element so critical for cybersecurity, for defenders, but then also important to look at on the threat landscape side as well?
Yeah, I think if you look at kind of the wide array of reporting that comes out from like Verizon DBIR to IC3 or other FBI reporting, what we see is that for the vast majority of breaches that maybe just don't involve some kind of like wide internet scanning, 0 day misconfiguration, some type of vulnerability, the vast majority of malicious outcomes require some form of human interaction. They need to provide credentials. They need to enable macros. They need to click or take some action. And so certainly in the email landscape, but then also SMS and others, right? We have this vast amount of data that kind of demonstrates all of the variety of ways that threat actors might try to get that human to take that interaction. And so as that is the most common method, that's what we wanted to highlight and focus on.
Absolutely. And it's been a while. Like the first human factor report came out almost 10 years ago. So how have you seen that element of human factor change, and kind of the biggest changes that you've seen since then?
Yeah, so in this report specifically, what I've kind of been involved with like the last four of them. I can't necessarily go back 10 years, but what I've seen with this report and kind of the way that it's changed over time is that we have continued to add more data sources. I am not really on the business side. I get to stick my nose into the down and dirty threat actor activity day after day, but our leadership has been really great about acquiring new sources of data where we have gaps in our attack chain, right? And so we've been able to kind of tell a more holistic story over time, and then also I think we continue to kind of refine our detection capabilities and our tracking methods on a day-to-day basis even. So the fidelity of the increased telemetry, the signal that we get continues to kind of be developed over time. And I feel like we're in a stronger place now than we were last year, and we'll continue to grow into that space.
Right. And, we're also seeing a lot of moves in the security space too, that have occurred over time. And I'm sure that, the report has changed, the data in the report has changed because of that. So, like, one big trend that was discussed in this year's report was that Microsoft has blocked macros by default in Office. And this has obviously had a big impact for threat actors that have used macros in their phishing attacks over the years. Can you talk about? I love in the report that you called it Macropolis. I think that's great. Can you talk a little bit about that, and kind of how you've seen attacker behaviors change because of this?
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, this was a huge one for me. Just one of the leading stories of last year, and two of my researchers, Selena Larson and Joe Wise, also just did a great talk on this at SleuthCon, and we released that report as well to the public. You can go check that out. But I think VBA macros were announced in October, and then they followed up with the announcement for XL4 macros also being disabled by default in February of 22. And I think those things were like fully implemented by April. And what we saw were that immediately a large array of threat actors pivoted to using all types of container files or archives, so like ISOs and images, like IMGs, and zip files, RAR, right? All kinds of kind of containers to bypass that like mark of the web detection. And then from there, it kind of continued to spin out of control, right? So we saw in the early portion of this year, OneNote be heavily utilized, and we've seen a return to PDFs recently as well. So I think absolute kudos to Microsoft for making that decision to disable macros by default, and the result is that we now somehow have this landscape where threat actors are iterating at even faster rate. They're creative. They're following the leader. What seems to work in the short term for one actor is being picked up by other actors. And if you look at kind of the charts in that report that I mentioned, there's a very clear delineation between the two time periods of like before and after.
Yeah, it's really cool to see that play out. And what sticks out to me there too is that this really is kind of playing into that cat and mouse game that we all know so well in cybersecurity. Defenders will do one thing and then attackers will kind of tweak their tooling or TTPs and try to keep up. And I do think the report also mentioned a couple of instances of how attackers are kind of fluctuating their different tactics. So as the cyber threat landscape continues to kind of evolve, how can companies really try to stay proactive and stay ahead in their defenses here?
Yeah, so in order to adequately defend in the modern landscape, you need like a really layered defense, right? You need something in the mail gateway. You need a cloud solution. You probably need endpoint solution. But I think if what we're talking about is ultimately mitigating risk, what we have learned is that often the weak point in the overall system is the person. It just takes one mistake, right? It takes one kind of slip up or lapse in judgment. And so I always go back to kind of this people centric approach, which is something that Proofpoint put forward years ago, and now I think has kind of been adopted by the industry at large. And it was also the basis of this report, right? So user training, partnering with threat intelligence vendors, um, uh, to figure out exactly what is in your network, what is your company seeing. So that's going to be all of the emotets, right? And with 94% of cloud tenants seeing some type of activity, focus on those spaces maybe rather than chasing things like APT or nation state activity, right? What are your users seeing in their day to day work, and start there and educate that user base on how to properly respond to, triage, ignore, quarantine, block, or deal with those threats.
Awesome. Well, Daniel, thank you so much for coming on to talk a little bit about the human factor report. And it was really great to talk to you.
Yeah, thank you very much. It was very nice to talk to you as well.